Hi guys, welcome to the video. Welcome to Boscombe down in the UK, and welcome to this beastie here. This is the T-45 Goshawk. It's by IndiaFoxtEcho and it's running in Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020. Now what we're going to do in the time-honoured fashion, we'll have a look at the outside, the inside, take it for a flight and see what we think. Now this aircraft holds a particular soft spot in my heart for a couple of reasons, or the Hawk I should say as a general type. The reason being is that when I was in the military I managed to get 50 hours flying in the back seat of a T1. It was actually the Hawk based at Boscombe Down, funny old thing why we're here. Well, it was one of two, but they were used by the School of Aviation Medicine, or the Centre for Aviation Medicine, that was based at Boscombe, and absolutely fantastic experience having 50 hours in the T1. Now the T1 is significantly different to the Goshawk in a number of areas. It still has the same general layout, form factor and whatnot, but there are some significant structural differences which we'll mention as we have a look around the aircraft. The second reason for my love of the aircraft is that when I started my channel 9 or 10 years ago, one of the first aircraft I did a review on was a T-45 Goshawk, and in that case it was a freeware aircraft by a guy called Dino Cataneo. Now fast forward 10 years past P3D and now into FS 2020, and we've got another T-45 Goshawk. As I say, it's by IndiaFoxtEcho, but at the helm is a guy called, you've guessed it, Dino Cataneo. So I have high hopes for this because I absolutely adored that version in FSX. However, what I will say, although this is payware, A, it's not expensive, and B, it is just a generational shift on, if not two generational shift on from the original. So in my money, spoiler alert, I think this is a lovely aircraft, and I really think it's great for the money, great value for money. Talking of which, let's go to product page up. Boom, there we go. Right. So it's available from Orbex or Sim Market, take a vendor of your choice. I must admit I've tended to be buying things of late on Orbex because of how easy it is through their website to install stuff. But there's three key information pieces on this. Obviously you get the usual spiel and some pretty pictures and whatnot, but the three pieces of information I would draw your attention to. The first is this box here with the price. Well, you can see it's not expensive. I mean, at full price, so this isn't even in a sale, full price just under 40 Australian dollars, just under 30 US dollars, just under 25 euros or 21 sterling pounds. That is not a lot of money by any stretch of the imagination for an add-on. The second thing is, after we go past the minimal history information here, which is actually very nice to read but not very detailed, we get to a few bits about the model. Yeah, fine. Asterisks. Due to current SDK limitations, the HUD is not collimated. It's important to stress the difference between SDK limitations and the developer. If the tool is not there for the developer to do it, then it cannot be done. That's no reflection on the developer, that is simply the limitation of the software they're working within. So HUD is not collimated, we can live with that. This can create minor problems during precision landings due to the coding restrictions. The HUD may not work well with TAA, and I'll tell you this for now, it doesn't work well with TAA. It's suggested to turn off TAA with the T-45. I do have an issue with that, in that if you turn off TAA, some of the textures in the sim become very grainy, including in the cockpit of this aircraft. So it's kind of you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. So I leave TAA on and just accept that the HUD is what the HUD is. This model is tuned to work with a modern flight model, so make sure in your settings you have it set to modern, not legacy. Otherwise it won't be half as nice an experience. So that's all I really need to draw your attention to. In terms of requirements, this for me is superfluous really. If your sim can run Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020 to any decent level, this aircraft is fine in my opinion. The resource use seems to be for me very low, and I get very good performance out of it. So yeah, that's the product page. back to our little beauty here, and what we're going to do is have a little bit of an external tour to start with. Now, as you can see, it's been carrier modified. The first thing you'll notice is the massive nose wheel. Look at the size of that thing in relation to the aircraft. So this has been carrier optimized, or the best way to describe it is the aircraft as a whole has been navalized. So the carrier undercarriage is the first and most striking aspect with the size of it. Now obviously for carrier landings, they don't flare, they just smash into the deck of a moving ship. It has to be strong, and therefore the airframe has to be beefed up to cope with it as well, which obviously adds weight and whatnot to the airframe. But very beefy, very strong. It's got to have things like the launch bar here for catapult launches, and likewise the steering is nose wheel steering as opposed to a castering nose wheel. So if you look at T1 Hawk, it's got a very different nose wheel. It's castering, and it's quite slender and small. It's only got a single front tyre as opposed to this having the two wheels. So really this thing's been beefed up massively. Other changes are less obvious immediately. The first one is slats. So this thing's got leading edge slats the original Hawk didn't have. It's got the same basic wing plan form. I'm not sure if it's slightly larger or not, but it has got slats, and this has got double slotted flap. And then coming down the back here, the critical one, or the most obvious one here, is the significant beefed up tailhook. Very strong and very prominent. You can also see it's got a certain amount of aerodynamic changes to the airframe because of the physical changes, things like the air brakes here. The air brakes here are kind of a clamshell. They come out either side, whereas the original Hawk had a ventral air brake. Now it had an interlock that meant you couldn't have the air brake out whilst the undercarriage was down, because obviously if you landed with the ventral air brake out, then you would smash it to bits, and you'd have a really bad day in the boss's office. Now let's just have a look at the overall 3D modelling whilst we're here. Yeah, gorgeous. Really gorgeous. Let's just drop down a bit, and let's zoom in and have a closer look. So let's start where we mean to go, which is going to be looking at the undercarriage. So the level of detail here is exquisite. That's the only word I can give. This thing's got lock wiring between the nuts. Look, lock wire in aviation and other technical fields is used to prevent nuts or bolts from undoing. So we've got lock wiring in a very nicely detailed 3D wheel hub. You can also see, in fact it's probably better on the other side, so let's scoot through to the other side. There we go, get a bit of light on the matter. You can see a really high level of detail on just the tyre. I mean, this attention to detail is absurd. You can also see the lock wiring a bit better there. But this attention to detail is absurd. Yeah, it just staggering. And then when you look up at the actual linkages, the mechanisms, the whole thing in relation to the nose wheel gear, it's just really well done. The 3D modelling is superb. The texturing, the oil and grubbiness, really outstanding. Really outstanding. Yeah. Come this way a bit and we can have a look at the main wheels, the main undercarriage. As I say, these are trailing link undercarriage. They are, in most aircraft, they'll give you a slightly flattering effect to your landings, but in this aircraft it's designed to take an absolute battering from landing on a ship. So you've got the main oleo, and then you've got, if you like, a leading link bit here with a trailing arm. As a result, this undercarriage is very beefy, very strong, and is considerably stronger than the original undercarriage on a Hawk, the Hawk T1. So again, another update, and you can see we've got flags for the lock pins, for the undercarriage pins, and very good, very high level of detail. You can see the texturing's very nice. You can see some of the lighting coming under the gloss of the wing on the underside. You can see some of the shadows coming in, and as I say, the attention to detail is just delightful. Let's just go down and have a little look over here, because it's not often you see that level of detail in terms of things like hydraulic lines for the brakes. Look at how lovely the detailing is there. The whole thing is just delightful, absolutely delightful. And again, you've got the same thing with the flap hinges. Just, yeah, the whole thing is really, really lovely. Let's just come up around here a bit. Yeah, I mean, there's not often where words fail me with regards to things like this. What fails me is my ability to control the drone cam. But there we go. Right. Glazing. Using the PBR techniques and what's available in FS 2020 is absolutely drop dead gorgeous. What I would highlight, one of the things that's a common feature for me, is when you get complex curves or you get areas of complexity, you often see the straight lines of the polygons coming through. Everything here looks just spectacular. There's not really, I've found it very difficult to find a great deal of squaring off of anything, but we've got a lot of 3D appendages. So you've got things like the handle here for locking the canopy. I don't know what vent this would be, but you've got the steps for getting in, climbing in. The static elements are very, very nicely done. You can also see a very good level of detail with that in terms of things like the wrinkling on the covers. Very, very nicely done. And then you can see the PBR in terms of this is a slightly more matte satin effect here. This is anti-glare. It stops the glare of the sun from affecting the pilots too badly. And really glossy paintwork down here. Very, very nicely done. All beautiful attention to detail. And we'll just come around here because this demonstrates some of the modelling. This kind of area here, it's almost impossible to determine where the 3D modelling of the wing and the airframe kind of join. It's just beautiful, absolutely wonderful, really, really nice. Just scoot up a little bit. Very nice effect on the top of the aircraft with these ducts here and the exhaust ducts here. Very nicely done indeed. And then something that I really do like the look of is going to be, when I can get there, looking in the cockpit. Look at that. I mean, that is just amazing. As a piece of 3D modelling, that is staggering. Really is. And don't forget, this is looking at the cockpit from the outside in. Just lovely. Again, scratches, different textures, the wear and tear around the panels. Just, yeah. Yeah, words fail me. What a lovely piece of 3D modelling. Right, let's jump inside and see what we think in there. Okay, so here we are, and we're going to have a look at the 3D modelling and the texturing from inside, and it's not going to be a surprise. Very, very, very high standard. So you've got the kind of dimpled effect of the plastic here or of the trim round here. You've got the wear and tear on things like the fuel shutoff lever. You've got very intricate work in terms of pipes and tubes and switches and textures, and you can see significant difference in the texture. I think it's more obvious this side, is it? Yeah. You've got really good texturing, and it's not repeated look. That's one of the important things for me, is that panel is different to that panel, is different to that panel, is different to that panel. You know, they've gone to a very, very high level of detail in terms of looking at demonstrating the textures with it. I didn't want to change that, but never mind, it's Tacan. It's not going to make a big difference to us. The texture for this, which is where the ejector seat pins go. So, as I say, we've got ejection seat pins. You can remove them. One there, and you've also got one for the MDC, which is this stuff here, the miniature detonating cord. Basically, when you eject, what happens is this blows a split second before the seat fires, and it shatters the canopy, and then the seat goes through the resulting hole. Very common in a lot of aircraft of its era, so things like the Harrier, the AV-8B, lots of aircraft had this mechanism. Although we were warned, I was warned that when you're in the Hawk, don't raise your seat too high, because if this goes off and your helmet's too close to the proximity of it, it can damage your helmet, which is always going to be a bad day. And then here, for example, you've got another tag which is for your other pins. So you've got one for the MDC and the canopy, and you've got one for your ejection seat. So theoretically, our ejection seat is live. put it to armed, and theoretically this MDC is now live. But you can see the lighting effect on the inside of the canopy is just drop dead gorgeous. So in terms of coming around here, we can have a look at the panel. Very, very nicely done. Lots of the switches are operative. There's a few which aren't. That may well be down to the fact that either it's just not worth having them operative, even for sort of a role play's sake, or it may be SDK related. So I'm not going to draw any inferences from what is and isn't operable. As long as what we need is operable, that's the main thing. So looking at textures, one of the things I have noted is a fault. It's got left and right the wrong way round when they're unlit. When they're lit, they're the correct way round, but we'll have a look at that later. So obviously we've got different reliefs to the panels, so the buttons and whatnot. These buttons do move just slightly. These buttons don't, which is a shame. Different noises though, which is nice. Now in terms of the appearance, you can see very nice 3D modelling in terms of relief, so everything's got a good depth to it. Everything appears absolutely spot on. Things like multi-layer instruments like this Standby AI, very well done. So you can see the fine detail in terms of the watermark here. Very, very nicely done. You can see the different effects of reflections and the glazing, and it's been very well done so that the glazing, it sounds straightforward, but the glazing looks like glass as opposed to just a printed instrument. Very nicely done indeed. Now the MFDs are something that the Hawk T1 didn't have, so this is more like the Hawk T2 with the multifunction displays and the ability to use better weapon sights and an up-front panel. But the Hawk T1 didn't have any of these snazzy things. All it had was a gun sight and lots of steam gauges. It doesn't matter from a handling perspective, it's still a delight to fly, but obviously these days we're getting more to the world of carrying some tellies in the front of the aircraft compared to gauges. CWP, and I like the fact that when you zoom in you can see what's written on them when they're not lit. And again, instrumentation, you can see very nice reflections on there. Working your way around, you can see all the panels, different lighting effects coming through. Now it's this sort of area that the graininess, if you turn TAA off, becomes more apparent for me, or for me anyway. So I've got this running in 2K textures, or 2K graphic settings I should say. I'm not sure how much of an impact that's having compared to say 4K or 1080p, but as I say, I tend to turn TAA off and just accept the limitations with regards to the impact on the HUD. Mileage for each person may vary. It's got some of the standard FS 2020 limitations, which if you don't code outside of the sim, you get things like switches rather than being rheostats are quite often on-off for things like lights. And likewise some systems, so the original FSX P3D and it would appear FS 2020 only consider the fact that an aircraft has one battery, so you end up with switches ganged up together like that. Not a massive loss of immersion if I'm honest, but a lot of things are kind of in this one way, because you can't use right click to turn things the other way. You can either do that or you can use the mouse wheel. But yeah, overall a really nice environment, and yeah, I think a picture paints 1,000 words really, doesn't it? So what we're going to do now is we're going to get the thing started, and we're going to work our way around the panel. So what we're going to do is start from the left, work all the way around to the right, and first thing we're going to do is the OBS Flow. We'll put that to on, which is the onboard oxygen generation system. We'll turn it on as well. We're going to close the fuel shut off. Make sure that the ignition is normal. Come around this way, we'll leave the start switch for the moment. Make sure all of these covers are down and switches where we expect them. Full and free movement of the throttle is fine. Flaps are down, that's what we saw outside, so it's the same indication. We don't need to worry too much about any of these at the moment. Working the way around, there's nothing obvious to alarm us. Coming all the way down here. And finally we get down here to the battery switches which come on, and like a lot of things they are ganged together. Power. So that power they're ganged together because of limitations in the sim and the SDK. So this isn't a bug, this is just literally how it is as a result of using the default SDK. If you use custom coding, you can work around it, but for me it doesn't lose any of the immersion factor, so I'm quite happy with that. We'll pop the gens ready for on. Lights, again the same thing, some of them are ganged together. Again, not a massive problem for me, but for some people it might be significant. But also you'll notice they're not rheostat, they're just on off, which is unfortunate. We'll just pop this to auto, and then we'll come down here. Navigation lights don't change between flash and steady, so we'll leave them on steady, but the anti-coal strobe lights will go to both, and then these lights here can go on, and we'll pop the formation lights on so we can get the full aesthetics of the lighting outside. Lamp test if you wanted it for up here. Warning, caution, dim or bright. Yeah, okay, yeah, we've got the message, but what we'll do is we'll start her up and take it from there. So you need three things really to start a jet engine. You need something to turn it, you need electricity for the ignition, and you also need fuel to burn. So you need something to turn it, which puts air in. Now in some aircraft obviously you'll use air, so something like a 737 or a Boeing, you'll use air in order to turn the turbine for the start. In this we have a thing called a GTS, a gas turbine starter, very similar to the T1, but basically with everything now fired up, what we should do is hit this button. We'll hear it start to fire. Put the start on, and needles moving. Next thing we're going to look for is for the oil pressure light to go out. If we didn't have an oil pressure light go out, then obviously we've got an issue and would have to shut down. And it's starting up nicely. It does take a little while to start. As it does so, we'll just do a couple of other bits of housekeeping. So that's all fine. What we're going to do now is turn the tellies on. That one and that one. Nice rendition of a test page. A deedle deedle. A deedle deedle. We'll turn the HUD on. And you can see we've got a representation of the HUD there. Now it's not quite collimated as they say, so it doesn't necessarily, if you change your viewpoint it won't necessarily relate to what it should relate to. Again, limitation of the sim rather than the developer. Engine's nicely powered up. What we're going to do at this point is we're going to raise our flaps, and we're going to do so in such a way that we can have a look at the outside animations, because they are slick. Very smooth. Double slotted flaps, as I say, with slats. The slats aren't present in the T1, but they are here. And then let's get inside and close her up. Handle up here. You'll notice, having started the aircraft, the external covers etc. have come off. There's also a slight change in sound as we're closed in, which is good, because a lot of aircraft don't have a change in sound, which is a default MSFS thing. They don't change volume between the inside and the outside, but this does, to the best of my knowledge. Yeah, I suppose it does. It depends on where you're looking, really. Yeah, it's subtle, but it is there, so we'll go with that. So we've got to turn a few other boxes on now, so coming around here we'll just work our way around. We don't want the master arm or the air data recorder event. We're going to put this, now this has various modes, so you can put stores on it, but obviously in the sim there are no such things as stores really at the moment, so you can have it as whether you want it as HSI. You can have the CDI, the course deviation indicator. The ADI is what I normally have on this side. Again, with some further options, you can have a duplicate of the HUD if you want, and there's a few other bits and bobs around here. So it does work with the upfront controller. So for example, the low altitude warning will put to 50 feet. Enter, and you'll see down here the low altitude warning is now 50 feet. And it really is quite well set up. Now it's obviously not exactly true to life, because as I say, it's not a combat sim, it's a civvy sim. So we're looking at, let's do the bingo to £500 of fuel. enter. Well, I've lost my enter button. There we go. And as I say, these buttons unfortunately aren't animated. But again, down here, tend to have the HSI on for navigation. Very nice, and it's really useful actually, because obviously with most sims you're scrolling for ever and a day trying to change the heading, whereas obviously with this you can just go, I want a heading of 360. Boom, done. You can see the heading bugs shifted around to there. Now what we're actually going to go for is a heading of about 240, because we've got controlled airspace to the north of us, so we'll go heading 240, enter, boom, over there, and that's as good to go really. Now obviously if you have a nav route in, it'll allow you to mess around with the waypoints, etc. I haven't put it with a nav route in actually, I probably should have done, but you know, it's all good, it's all good. So radio down here, hopefully we can get the effect from this angle. Don't always get the effect, but basically what happens a lot of the time is when you turn it on, you'll have like little grey remnants of the digits, which are the LCD displays before they've actually been lit. We'll see if it manages to do it this time. You can just maybe see them there, and then boom, it goes with the ambers, and then it comes up with the frequency. Really nice. Instead of it just pinging to life the frequency, really, really nice. And yeah, just lots of it is really, really nice to do. There are elements obviously that are unclickable, and you know, realistically for this is mode 1 IFF, not really something that civvies use, you see, so there's no point animating it. This however is your transponder, the 4 digits here for the mode 3 and mode 3 alpha. Mode 3 is just transponding squawking normally, and alpha is with altitude, but ident is up here if you wanted to use ident if you were online flying and you were able to use the transponder in it. And then you've got mode 1, mode 2, mode 3, so you'd have to put your mode 3 on, and then that becomes pertinent to this. Radalt test if you wanted to test your radalt, etc. So unfortunately these press to test colour switches aren't here, but aren't active, but yeah, I mean the vast majority of it is, and certainly for what we need, it's got everything we would want to have. Let's just pop outside and we will have a look at the lights. So I'll do it using this. Wow, look at the scratches on that canopy. Beautiful. Aircrew are very nicely detailed, but let's just zoom out and see what we've got as lights. Yeah, they're not very bright, but they're there. I think that's probably because of the lighting in the sim more than anything. But without further ado, let's get this thing airborne and see what we think. So I'll see you at the runway. Okay, so here we are at the runway, ready to go. Runway 23 at Boscombe, which was either 23 or 05 were the preferred runways due to the length. The other 2 runways are considerably shorter. Now the first thing I'm going to highlight is that although the ground taxiing is very nice, it's very well harmonised in terms of the rate of turn and the foot pedals. One of the things I'll highlight now is if I'm off the brakes completely is how much thrust it needs to get this thing moving. You can hear it spooling up and it's still not moving, still not moving, still not moving. Just started moving. And what thrust are we at? What power setting is that? Yeah, it's not moving till we're over 80%, which is a little bit too high for me. However, let's make sure we've got the right flap setting. First stage of flaps. Just holding it on the toe brakes. And away we go. Now hopefully it doesn't have the massive twitchiness in the nose wheel steering that a lot of aircraft seem to suffer from. So we've just got delicate inputs with the rudder pedals, just to try and maintain the centre line. I think we've got a bit of a wind from the left here. I say delicate inputs, I'm about as delicate as a bulldozer. A bit too fast really, but up we go. Gear up, make sure we're trimmed properly. Now this nose bobbling is something I've noticed in a few aircraft. As you can see, collimation wise we're nowhere near where we would need to be in terms of the HUD. So in some respects the HUD for me is kind of a nice to have, but it's not really a particularly accurate feature of the aircraft as a result. Likewise, you can change the HUD colour in terms of whether it's dark or light, really. Not sure which one it was. Yeah, that changes the colour, but you really can't see it unless it's against a dark background, and even then it's not great. Look, if you zoom in, so let's have a look at zooming in. Obviously you can see it better, look, but for me, as I say, I don't really use it that much. Performance wise, it is pretty much a Hawk in terms of performance. It does exactly what it says on the tin, really. Lovely performance, lovely handling. We'll just have a quick look at its dynamic handling. So it's got quite a good bit of speed to it. I mean, it's not a rocket ship by any stretch of the imagination. We'll just try and trim it out a little bit. Now, the original Hawk was capable of spinning. It was a permitted manoeuvre as well. It was, however, very uncomfortable. I think we had to start at about 20,000 feet. I didn't spin it. The pilot I was with, who was a very experienced test pilot, did. But I never flew a stall or a spin in the actual thing. I just had a bit of hand flying. So what we're going to do is just going to have a look at the stability. So let's just get it trimmed out, really. Just under 300 knots, a bit more power, really. That'll be good enough for government work. Roll to the left. Neutral, stable as you like. I'll be honest, I would have expected a little bit more in terms of the stability for roll, given the fact it's a swept wing planform. But having said that, we've seen all of the various adjustments that have been made in terms of strakes, the ventral strakes and whatnot, and the little areas just in front of the leading edge of the tailplane. So it wouldn't be a surprise to me if this was how the real thing flew. In terms of stability and pitch, what we're looking for is the speed to drop down, and as the speed drops down, the nose should drop as well, which it is starting to do. So it's weakly a positive in terms of pitch. So if I put it down, what we should see is that the speed should increase, and as it does so, we should see the nose start to rise, which it is doing. So it is positive in terms of pitch, which is accurate. What I will say is I found it really hard. We did some instrument flying, and I found it really hard just to get the trim just spot on so that we wouldn't climb or descend. And really easy aircraft to fly, just general flying, handling. Really easy aircraft to fly in real world, the T1. Most private pilots could fly it, I would suggest, with quite a good level of comfort with it. It's just everything happens that much faster than an average piston. But what I would say is that in terms of what it's capable of doing towards the edge of its handling, it's capable of doing a damn sight more than your average GA aircraft. So what we're doing is we're just having a look at the turn, see what it's like, see what sort of turn rate we can get. He's maintaining a turn. We're still accelerating on full power. Please forgive any stuttering. That's just because of how overloaded my computer is. Yeah, it's really nice. It's not losing any speed, so I can pull really hard. That's the stick fully back, and we're not really losing much on the way. In fact, we're accelerating at full power. So that's not quite how I recall it. Let's just zoom up, get a bit of altitude. Yaw stability in this is strong. So let's just demonstrate that. Kick it one way and it snaps back. What I will say is your authority is not particularly great. So full left rudder, full right rudder. So yeah, the yaw authority isn't amazing, and yeah. So overall, the handling is just very placid, I would say. What I would say is that the T1 didn't really have any massive vices just flying it around. I mean, you were able to do quite a number of aerobatic manoeuvres with a great deal of ease, really. As long as you had the entry speeds right, you could do virtually anything you wanted. Which is probably why, you know, teams like the Red Arrows used them, and lots of militaries used them. Very, very lovely aircraft to fly in real life. Look at that. That looks real world, doesn't it? It is such a gorgeous sim. Let's roll off the top. So yeah, the handling is what the handling is. Let's go down and let's have a bit of a low level play. Because realistically, if you're getting this aircraft, you're not getting it because you're training for your commercials in it. You're getting it because you want to have fun. And so that's one of the major criteria for me in terms of, is this aircraft fun to fly? And I have to say, I think it is. Coming down to low level, we're just going to have a bit of a mess around. Doing 500 odd knots now. It's really quite stable. Very nice to fly. Let's get that low level experience. Really get down. Sim's a bit stuttery at this level, just purely out of how much it's trying to cope with in terms of the scenery. Okay, so Fanna's a bit of an airfield to play with, and we're going to do kind of a bit of a run in and break, really, not a particularly great one, no doubt. Speed's just 350. What's our heading going to be about? 080 inbound. Going to pull through in varying degrees till about 260. Losing speed nicely, no need for the air brake at this point. Drop first stage of flap. Rolling out 260. Trimming. Check the airfield position. That's nice. Speed's coming down nicely. Gear down. Bit of power to counteract the drag. Drop full flat. Or turn in for final. Watching the speed, it has a tendency to drop speed quite quickly, this thing. Indexers are alive, so I know that the gear's down. See how this turns out. It's not too bad, probably high. Yeah, 4 whites. Too fast. Coming into lineup. Don't forget we don't need to flare with this thing as it's a Navy jet. 2 reds, 2 whites. 3 reds, 4 reds, come on, get a bit of altitude, back to 1 white, 3 reds. Too fast, far too fast. Let's kill the speed. Try and get somewhere near the centre line. I'm going to land long here if I'm not careful. Ooh. bit of a bobble, nose wheel down and brake. Not my best landing ever, but we're down. So, very brief summary. Exterior, drop dead gorgeous. Interior, very, very good. There's only a couple of very minor things for me that drop it down. Systems functionality, all of the key systems are there. There's a couple which it would have been nice to have had just to play with. The lack of a carrier is a bit of a shame, really, with the tail hook, etc. There we go. Boom, nailed it. Oh, we've sunk into the ground for some mysterious reason. So yeah, lack of a tail hook. Nice animations on things like the air brakes though. Exterior model there, then really, 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 really good. Love it. Interior modelling, good. A couple of things where I think it's not quite there. Oh, didn't even turn that radio on, look, how remiss. Sounds are okay. I'd say the sounds are nothing to write home about. They're okay. Yeah, there's nothing more to say about that. And in terms of handling, it does what it says on the tin. It behaves like a training jet fighter, as you would expect. It's got no real vices to it. I think the stall is inaccurate, and I very much doubt, given the stability it's got, it will spin properly, although we didn't try it. So yeah, it's pretty viceless, if I'm honest. The only thing you've got to be aware of is that once you get to the bottom of the speed tape, it will start to drop speed quite quickly. And the final parting bit is, I hope it gets fixed soon, but the HUD isn't particularly great. Not a deal breaker for me, but overall I think for £20, £21, whatever it is, bearing in mind that's the full price, not even in a sale, for me, I really enjoy the aircraft. Hope you enjoyed the video, guys. If you did, don't forget to tick like, share and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.